Let's talk about keyboard replacement. Sometimes laptop keyboards need to be replaced. I've had lots of people over the past many years tell me about their keyboard not working properly. And over that time, I've noticed several culprits. Overuse, for one thing, loose ribbon cables, perhaps a spilled beverage, or users just simply pounding their keyboard. And keyboards can fail because of several reasons. Here's a couple of the problems you might encounter. The first is stuck keys. Stuck keys could occur because of overuse, damage to the individual key's switch, or if liquid were spilled on the keyboard. And you might be able to identify this because you can see that it doesn't work in Windows, or your UEFI or BIOS reports an error. You might be able to remove the keycap and clean the key switch underneath, and that might fix the problem. You may also have to remove the entire keyboard. Another possibility is a loose connection. If the laptop is moved around and jostled a lot, if the laptop's taken on a plane or on a bus, things get moved around and the connections can get loose sometimes, especially if you're going from one climate to another where there are vast humidity and temperature changes. So that can cause a little bit of creep with the connections also. And it's the ribbon cable that connects the keyboard to the motherboard, also known as a flex cable. So to fix this, usually you got to pull the keyboard away and reattach that cable securely. And the other possibility is it's just a damaged keyboard. Users who drop heavy items on the keyboard or operate the keyboard with a heavy hand might cause it to warp or bend. And some laptops do better than this than others. So, you might find a damaged keyboard also. If that happens, you got to remove the whole keyboard and put a new one in. So here's the main steps for replacing a keyboard. First, you want to prepare the laptop. You want to shut it down, unplug it, disconnect the battery, then employ ESD prevention, as always. And because there's nowhere on the laptop to connect an anti-static wrist strap or mat, you'll need to connect these to the chassis of a nearby unplugged desktop computer or a proper earth bonding point of some sort. So then you're going to want to remove the trim. Now this all depends on how you get to the keyboard. Let's say you're getting to the keyboard from the top. You've opened the laptop and you're getting to it from the top. In this case, the keyboard is usually held in place by a piece of trim or an entire plastic housing or bezel. And the trim might be in between the keyboard and the monitor, or it might surround the keyboard. And you'll need to either pry this out with wooden trim sticks or those orange sticks or a shim, or use a fine flathead screwdriver. You'd rather stick with the wood or plastic because there will be less chance of damaging the laptop. There are lots of special tools out there to remove trim, bezels, hinge covers. If you do have to remove the whole piece of trim, you go slow and you go gentle and you move slowly around the entire piece, snapping it out one little piece at a time. Now, you might also have to get to the keyboard from the bottom. And in that case, you have to remove the entire bottom cover, and you're going to have to remove a lot of stuff to get at the keyboard. And I'll talk about that more when we show the laptops. So then remove any screws that connect the keyboard. When the trim is removed or the cover is removed, you'll probably see 2 or 3 screws, and you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver or perhaps a Torx screwdriver to remove these. Then disconnect the keyboard. You'll see it's connected by that flex cable, by that ribbon cable. And you want to be real gentle with this cable and the connection. It might have 2 locking tabs, or it might have a plastic piece that you can grab to pull the whole connector out. So you want to be real careful with that. It's easy to damage those. It's also easy to damage the flex cable. Always try to grab from the plastic connector or from that plastic tab, not from the flex cable or not from the ribbon cable itself. Then you want to replace the keyboard. A new keyboard can sometimes be purchased from the manufacturer, but you'll need to know the part number, and it should say that on the old keyboard. You'll probably also need to know the model number of the laptop. When you put the new keyboard in, connect the flex ribbon cable lock it on both sides, make sure it's firmly in place. And sometimes there's a little routing area where you can route the cable. So make sure it's in place. And then you're going to put the screws back in for the keyboard and then replace your plastic trim or the entire cover. And if you had to get to the keyboard from the bottom of the laptop, you're going to have to reassemble everything. You might have to put the whole system board and CPU back in and the heat sink and all kinds of stuff, the RAM. So, watch out for that. That's going to be more in depth. It depends on what type of keyboard you're dealing with, what type of laptop you're dealing with. And most importantly, test the keyboard when you're done. Verify that the new keyboard works by testing every key within a word processor, like WordPad or Word, and test the function keys as well. Make sure everything functions properly on that keyboard before you give it the OK. So let's show a couple laptops now and show the keyboard removal and reinstallation. Here's an older Dell system, and replacing the keyboard on older laptops is really easy. And this is one of the reasons that I love this tool right here. This is a two-way screwdriver. It's got the Phillips head, and it's also got the flat head. And it's pretty easy to replace this guy. You remove this bezel on the top, pry under here to pull that guy up, pull that guy out, and then you have two screws here. Phillips head, so we'll switch this out. Unscrew these. So really just the two screws, 1 and 2, and I'll remove the other. Once you've removed those, you can pull the keyboard up. And here's what's the same with just about any laptop keyboard. They're going to be connected by way of a flex connector here. Careful not to touch the flex connector or pull it too far. You pull it too far, you might yank it out of the housing or damage it otherwise. Usually they come with some type of tab that you can pull on here, and you can pull the entire flex connector out right there. Replacement is as easy as getting the right part number, which is going to be shown on here. So that's pretty simple. For this laptop, the touchpad requires removing the rest of this bezel, but chances are you're not going to see this. I just wanted to show this because this is the typical way to I just wanted to show this laptop because this is the typical way that a keyboard will connect. Now, on a more current laptop such as this, everything's integrated. So you have your keypad and your touchpad, and all this stuff is underneath this bezel. So you can't really take it out the same way we would with the older laptops. So with this, it becomes a bit more difficult because this keyboard has to be removed from this side. All this metal here is the bottom of the keyboard. And there's a couple screws holding it in place still. But to get at it, we have to really disassemble the laptop. We have to take off the main board. We have to take off the speakers. We have to take off the fan and heatsink assembly just to get at that keyboard. And the same thing with the touchpad. But you get the idea. It's going to be a little bit more to do here on a newer laptop. The good thing is keyboards don't fail as often on newer laptops, but they can fail. You can get stuck keys, you can get damaged keyboards, somebody might spill coffee on the keyboard, and you probably have worse things to worry about if they do that. Something's going to go bad in here most likely if that happens. You might get damage. You as the tech, you got to fix it, so you have to replace it. And again, use the right part number, which is up here, upside down, of course. But same type of thing. That's going to be a couple screws and a flex connector. The touchpad underneath here is really just a flex connector. It's the screws that we already took out that hold that guy in place when we took off the bottom of the case. So pretty easy change outs, but just time consuming because you got to remove all this. And you have to be real careful when doing so because you don't want to damage these circuit boards or these connectors. All these things have to be taken apart in order to get these things off. And remember to put the circuit board in an anti-static bag, right after you take it out. And make sure you have your anti-static measures in place too. Very important. So there's a little bit about the keyboard, and that's it for this sub lesson.